The ANC will hold one of its biggest political sessions next week to try to set policy on the economy, employment and social welfare. The ANC's National General Council is a midterm policy review where much attention will be focused on how President Jacob Zuma's government is running Africa's largest economy. Joining me now, Lumkile Mondi, Chief Economist at the IDC. Lumkile, thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon.
We've been seeing money coming off the table when it comes to the bond market, and this is ahead of the National General Council that will be held on Sunday. What do you think the main focal point is? Because we know there's major things on the agenda. I mean, nationalisation of mines, of course, being the most important for the investor community.
Well, in fact, firstly, nationalisation is completely off the agenda in terms of the doables. Remember that the ANC doesn't have yet a position. There's one wing of the ANC, the Youth League, which is arguing for nationalisation. And we saw the Counsel document on full employment that, you know, even there, it's just a peripheral issue. So I don't think that there'd be any hot debate around nationalisation. I don't think markets should be very worried about that.
That's interesting, because I allude to a Mail and Guardian review that was done on all the provinces, and basically what the newspaper did had spoken to various provincial secretaries, and they all say that nationalisation is going to be something that should be debated, and some kind of state intervention should come through. So it seems that it is on the minds of many leaders.
Well, I mean, if those leaders are applying their mind, they should fix the problems. You know that our SOEs are riddled with problems, from SAPC to whether it's Transnet. There's no leadership there. You know, the CEO hasn't been appointed. 2.5 years later, Maria has been away. So for me, you fix and concentrate on the easy things. And
so you're saying the parastatals should be a focal point? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that, you know, there's bigger problems than nationalisation.
Okay, what is the biggest problem for you?
The biggest problem for us is decision making. That basically, in the past 18 months, a lot of issues that are very easy, that just need decision, haven't been made. Whether it's water licenses that are so important for us in terms of industrial policy, particularly in expanding the forestry sector, making sure that, you know, when the markets pick up, we've got sufficient wood to supply to the international market. Secondly, the independent power producer debate is been going on for quite a long time, and they're talking about only April to have an authority. Why can't you do it now? So lots of those issues that are very simple, that there's been no leadership on them on making those decisions. So for them to be biting more than they can even swallow, I'll really be surprised.
But Lumkile, you know, looking at the agenda and looking at what most people have been focusing on, it's basically Jacob Zuma's proposed bill, which many people have been talking about, whether we're going to be seeing a support of nationalisation, and of course Kasatu's calls for changing the economics landscape as well, to try and ensure that we don't have a strong rand and that we see various changes. These things that you mentioned are very important, independent power producers and various licenses that need to come to the fore. Do you think it's going to be hotly debated at the meeting as it should be, or do you think the other things are going to take preference?
Those will be debated, Eleni, but for me, if I had to advise the state, you concentrate on what you can do. Whether it's nationalisation, the state is very weak. The state can't deliver basic service to the electorate. So the idea is to address those issues. Secondly, talking about the currency. The currency, there's very little that you can do. And for me, it's not even an immediate issue. The currency is tweaking. Globally, where will the demand come from? We know that the demand is very flat in Europe and America, except for China, India, where there's demand. So if you're talking about all these big issues, for me, they're neither here nor there. South Africans want basic needs to be addressed. And hence, that's where the documents start becoming exciting, because it's talking about basic needs to overcome the legacy of apartheid and colonialism. And therefore, if these guys at the ANC can concentrate on those basic things and make decisions on them, and then let the bigger things, who are there as private sector, where will then play a role when the enabling environment is correct. At the moment, our challenge is that the enabling environment is not correct. We don't allow private sector players in the power sector. We're not allowing private sector players in the rail sector. And therefore, these are the things that I think government should be concentrating on making sure that the cost of doing business is lowered than focusing on big issues like nationalisation or the currency. Those are things that you can't manage. You don't have tools to manage them at the moment.
You were talking about the Kasatu document being relatively exciting. What excites you about that document? What do you think should be implemented? Well,
is government to do the basic stuff. Make decisions around water, because they're talking about industrialization. For industrialization to happen, if you want to do downstream beneficiation and do further down fabrication, you need power, you need water. Because we mine, we're one of the biggest mining countries in the world. So if you don't have water, you don't have power. then how are we going to implement industrial policy? So the COSATU document talks to industrialization as a cornerstone. And secondly, that, you know, for us to be able to absorb the millions of unemployment, our 25%, we need to focus on labor-intensive sectors. I've talked about the forest sector, which is rural, which can absorb a lot of jobs. But even there, the water situation is not good for Sapi, Mondi, York, to be able to expand that. So there are a lot of these basic things that COSATU is pushing for. The other issues that I don't agree with COSATU because the document is not talking to growth. Secondly, the issue around taxing the rich. You need savings, you need the rich to keep on circulating the money. So those issues, I'll differ with them, but there's a forum for me to debate that. But I think at the moment, what we want government to do is to make decisions on the basic things that I've talked about, that you don't think about nationalization or the rand, because those, you don't have tools to manage if there's a sudden collapse of the currency. Do what we elected you to do. We elected you to do basic things. Make decisions on water, make decisions on parastatal, that the parastatal have got leadership, which they don't have at the moment. So the basic things, fix your boards, make sure that the boards are independent, that people that are competent to make decisions that will lead these parastatals to do what they're supposed to do to the economy.
Okay, Lumkile, I come back to the point that all these pertinent issues that you are mentioning are very vital for South Africa's growth and economy if we are going to increase the foreign direct investments into the country. But these are the topics that haven't really been put forward. As I mentioned, other topics of conversation have taken preference. Who should we be listening to when it comes to the National General Council that will be held? Who do you think is going to bring up these very pertinent issues?
Well, at the moment, unfortunately, because no one is talking about them, we've been framed. The debate has been framed. It's been framed by the COSATU, the Youth League. Unfortunately, the big issues that are pressing us are not on the agenda. The issues around schooling. I know we've come out of a very crippling strike, particularly for our learners, some of whom come December, they won't be employable if I've got looking for them because they haven't had good training at high school level. Secondly, the teachers who remain quite a critical part, but they're not playing that part. So there's a lot of basic issues, Ellen. That's something that, you know, in a country like ours, where we know that human capital investment is critical, the ANC should be debating those issues to make sure that the schooling is never interrupted again, that the public services is focused on delivery, that itself creates that enabling environment for businesses to succeed when the things comes. And those issues are not being debated at all. They're all focusing on nationalization, and it's typical of when the government has got failures. We used to say when we were students that, you know, when you are failing your country, what you tend to do, presidents tend to visit overseas, to externalize. You bring global issues to the table, when in fact, you should be focusing on people on domestic bread and butter issues so that your economy is in good stead for it to be able to compete when the recovery happens globally. At the moment, I'm not seeing that. Nationalization, what for?
Do you think this is going to hamper international investment and international appetite for South Africa going forward? Because if these issues are not sorted out, as you've mentioned, industrialization, all the sorting out of the education system as well, and putting funds into very important divisions of the economy, do you think that is going to change perceptions of South Africa going forward?
Not really. I mean, South Africa, you know, we're one of the respected democracies in Africa. Ourselves in Botswana, I think up there, if you look at stuff from Transparency International, we are there. We've got just a late democratizer problem where, because we've been tested, a lot of the institutions that we formed in 1996 after our constitution, that those institutions are being stretched tremendously. Whether it's the courts, they're being stretched quite tremendously. So all the institutions that are supposed to protect our constitution are being tested. And therefore, because we're a late democratizer, we're new in this world, but at the same time, we've got a very dominant party which seeks to now infringe the very constitution that they developed. And therefore, it's quite critical for us as a democracy to have that voice of civil society, of private sector, trying to steer the politician back to the track. And the track of South Africa is how to address unemployment, poverty, and inequality. If the ANC had to debate those issues and come with policies, not only will the domestic players be happy about it, but global players will be happy, because it means that the country will be sustainable in the long term, and therefore to be a good place to do business. But focusing nationalization and rand, you're not addressing our problem.
Okay, Lumkile, also just touching on the strikes, because you mentioned them, and obviously that has had a very big impact, not only on the education system, but on the public sector as well. How do you see that playing out? Because we still haven't seen any kind of resolution, and it's created a lot of havoc in the country. Do you expect such a trend to continue?
Well, the confusion is going to continue for quite a long time, because it's leadership.
Okay.
If you don't have that, we're going to be in a mess that we're in at the moment.